Robert Hansen clutched the framed photo of his son Thomas as he stared out the window of his modest two-bedroom house. The leaves were beginning to turn, painting the countryside in shades of amber and gold. Fall had been Thomas's favorite season. 5 years had passed since the funeral, but the weight of loss still pressed heavily on Robert's chest, especially on days like today, Thomas's birthday. He would have been 28 today. Robert placed the photo back on the mantel, arranging it carefully among the collection of memories: Thomas's high school graduation, his first day in uniform, and the last Christmas they'd spent together before his deployment. Behind these treasured snapshots sat the folded flag the military had presented to Robert at the funeral, a ceremony he could barely remember through the fog of his grief. Robert moved to the kitchen and poured himself a cup of coffee, black and bitter just as he liked it. The house was too quiet, had been for years. After his wife Ellen passed away from cancer when Thomas was just 10, it had been just the two of them against the world. Robert had done his best to be both mother and father, though he often wondered if his best had been enough. The doorbell rang, pulling Robert from his thoughts. He wasn't expecting anyone, especially not at 8 in the morning. Through the peephole, he saw a man in his late 20s with short-cropped hair and nervous eyes. Robert didn't recognize him but noticed the military bearing in his posture. "Can I help you?" Robert asked, opening the door halfway. The young man shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Mr. Hansen? I'm Peter Collins. I served with your son in the 75th. I know this is out of the blue, but I've been trying to work up the courage to come see you for years." Robert's heart quickened. Thomas had been part of the 75th Ranger Regiment, a special operations unit. The military had been vague about the details of his son's death, citing classified operations and national security. He opened the door wider. "Come in, Peter." The young man stepped inside, glancing around the living room before his eyes settled on Thomas's photo on the mantel. "He was a good man, sir, the best I've known." Robert gestured toward the couch. "Please sit. Can I get you some coffee?" "No, thank you, sir. I can't stay long." Despite his words, Peter sat on the edge of the couch, his back straight as a board. "I've been having trouble sleeping since it happened. My therapist says I need to face it, talk about it. That's why I'm here." Robert sat across from him, studying the young man's face. There was something in his eyes, guilt, fear, something Robert couldn't quite place. "The military didn't tell me much about how Thomas died, just that it was during an operation overseas." Peter looked down at his hands. "That's what they told us to say if anyone asked." A chill ran through Robert's body. "What do you mean?" "The official story isn't what happened, Mr. Hansen. But I could lose everything if—" Peter's voice trailed off. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. "I can't say more, but this might help you understand. Please don't tell anyone I was here." Robert took the envelope, his hand trembling slightly. "Peter, if you know something about my son—" "I'm sorry, Mr. Hansen, I truly am." Peter stood up abruptly. "Thomas was my friend. He saved my life more than once. I owe him this much at least." With that, he walked to the door. "Be careful who you trust with what's in that envelope." Before Robert could respond, Peter was gone. Robert stared at the envelope in his hands, plain and white with no markings. Inside, he found a single sheet of paper with coordinates and a date written on it, along with a memory card. The date was 3 weeks after Thomas had supposedly died. Robert's hand shook as he went to his old laptop and inserted the memory card. There were several files on it, but one was labeled with his son's initials, TH. He clicked on it, and a video began to play. The footage was grainy and appeared to be from some kind of security camera. It showed a busy market somewhere in the Middle East, judging by the architecture and the people. Robert was about to close it, thinking Peter had given him the wrong file, when his heart stopped. There, in the corner of the frame, was Thomas, or someone who looked exactly like him. He was dressed in civilian clothes, his head partly covered, but Robert would know his son anywhere. The timestamp on the video showed it was recorded 2 months after Thomas's funeral. Robert played the video, again and again, each time focusing on the figure that looked like his son. There was no mistake. The way he walked, the slight tilt of his head as he scanned his surroundings, that was Thomas. Robert had raised him. He knew every gesture, every mannerism. But how was this possible? Thomas's body had been returned to him. There had been a funeral, a casket lowered into the ground. Military officials had expressed their condolences, had spoken of Thomas's bravery and sacrifice. Robert stumbled to his feet and rushed to his bedroom, digging through his closet, until he found the box of documents related to Thomas's death. He emptied it onto his bed, scanning through the official letters, the death certificate, the brief report on how Thomas had died in service to his country. None of it mentioned the specific circumstances of his death, only that it occurred during a classified operation. Another detail struck him. The casket had been sealed. The military representative had explained that due to the nature of Thomas's injuries and the time that had passed before they could recover his body, viewing wasn't recommended. Robert had accepted this at the time, too lost in grief to question. Now, with the image of his son very much alive months after his supposed death burned into his mind, doubt began to creep in. What if Thomas wasn't dead? What if the entire thing had been staged, but why? And who could he trust to help him find the truth? Robert called the only person he thought might believe him, his brother-in-law, Jack, who had been like a second father to Thomas after Ellen died. Jack had always been skeptical of authority and had expressed his own doubts about the circumstances of Thomas's death years ago. "I need you to come over," Robert said when Jack answered. "And don't tell anyone where you're going." Within an hour, Jack was sitting in Robert's living room watching the video for the third time. "That's him, Rob. That's definitely Thomas." "But they told me he was dead, Jack. They gave me a flag and a sealed casket." Robert paced the room, unable to sit still. Why would they lie? And if that's really Thomas in the video, where is he? Now, it's been 5 years. Jack rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Special operations units sometimes do things outside the books. Maybe Thomas was recruited for something so classified that they had to make it look like he died, without telling his own father. Robert's voice cracked with emotion. "They let me bury an empty casket and grieve for 5 years? "We don't know that the casket was empty," Jack cautioned. "All we have is this video, which could have been taken before he died. The date could be wrong." Robert shook his head. "No, I spoke with Thomas 3 days before they told me he was killed. He had that scar on his jaw in our video call, the one he got during training the month before. That same scar is visible in this market video. This was taken after they told me he was dead. I'm sure of it." Jack leaned forward, his expression serious. "What are you going to do?" Robert looked at the coordinates on the paper Peter had given him. "First, I need to figure out where this place is. Then I need to find out if there's any way to exhume the casket." "That won't be easy," Jack warned. "If there is some kind of cover-up, they'll fight you every step of the way." "I don't care." Robert's jaw set with determination. "If there's even a chance my son is alive, or if they lied about how he died, I need to know. I owe him that much." As dusk settled outside, casting long shadows across the living room, Robert and Jack began to plan. They would need legal help, maybe a journalist who wasn't afraid to ask difficult questions. It would be a long, hard battle against powerful institutions, but for the first time in 5 years, Robert felt something other than grief. He felt hope, and that was worth fighting for. 3 weeks had passed since Peter's unexpected visit, and Robert's dining room had transformed into an investigation headquarters. Maps, printouts, and sticky notes covered the table. Jack had taken time off work to help, bringing his old laptop and printer to keep their research off Robert's regular devices. "We need to be careful," Jack had warned. "If there really is some kind of cover-up, they might be monitoring your online activity." Robert had laughed it off at first, thinking Jack was being paranoid. But then came the unmarked car parked down the street for 3 days straight, and the strange clicks on his phone line. Now, He wasn't so sure. They had identified the location in the video as a market in northern Syria. The coordinates Peter had provided matched perfectly, but that only led to more questions. What was Thomas doing in Syria after his supposed death? Was he working undercover? Had he been captured? Or had he chosen to disappear? "I found something," Jack said, entering the dining room with a cup of coffee in one hand and a folder in the other. "I spoke with my old buddy from law school who works at the county clerk's office. He pulled the burial permit for Thomas's funeral." Robert looked up from the laptop where he'd been searching for information about exhumation laws. "And? It's strange. The paperwork was rushed through, which isn't typical. And look at this." Jack pointed to a signature at the bottom of the page. The authorizing official wasn't from our local office. It was someone from Washington. Robert studied the document. "Colonel Andrew Preston, do we know who he is?" "I did some digging. He works with a special division that handles sensitive cases, military personnel who die under classified circumstances." Robert's phone rang, interrupting them. The caller ID showed an unknown number. After a moment's hesitation, he answered. "Mr. Hansen?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar and tense. "My name is Grace Wilson. I was a medic in your son's unit. We need to talk." "How did you get this number?" Robert asked, signaling to Jack to grab a pen and paper. "That doesn't matter. What matters is I heard you're asking questions. Meet me tomorrow, 2 p.m. at the coffee shop on Main and 5th. Come, alone." She hung up before Robert could respond. Jack looked concerned. Could be a trap, or it could be someone else who knows what happened to Thomas. Robert rubbed his tired eyes. "I have to go." The next day, Robert arrived at the coffee shop 30 minutes early, choosing a table with a clear view of both the entrance and the street. Jack was parked across the street watching from his car. At exactly 2 p.m., a woman in her early 30s, with short brown hair and alert eyes, walked in. She scanned the room before approaching Robert's table. "Mr. Hansen?" Robert nodded, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Grace?" She sat down, her back to the wall. "I don't have much time. I'm risking a lot coming here." "I appreciate it," Robert said. "You were in Thomas's unit?" Grace ordered a coffee when the waitress approached, but didn't touch it when it arrived. "Yes. I was the field medic attached to his team for the operation where he supposedly died. Except he didn't die, at least not then." Robert's heart raced. "So the video is real? Thomas was alive after they told me he was dead?" Grace lowered her voice. "The official story is that Thomas died during a raid on a suspected terrorist compound. But that's not true. The raid happened, but Thomas wasn't killed. He was recruited for a deep cover assignment right afterward. They needed someone who could disappear completely. Why Thomas? He spoke the language fluently, knew the culture, and had specific skills they needed. It was supposed to be a 6-month assignment. After that, they were going to bring him back, fake a rescue story, and reunite him with you." Grace glanced nervously at the door. "But something went wrong." Robert leaned forward. "What happened to my son, Grace?" "I don't know for sure. About 3 months into his assignment, we lost contact. The official line was that his cover was blown and he was killed trying to escape. But there was never a body recovered, and some of us had doubts." She pulled a small notebook from her pocket and slid it across the table. "This is all the information I could gather. Locations, dates, names of people who might know more." "Why are you helping me?" Grace's expression softened. "Thomas saved my life once. He talked about you all the time, how he was your only family after his mom died. When I heard through the grapevine that you were looking into his death, I couldn't stay silent." She stood up. "Be careful, Mr. Hansen. The people who set this up won't want the truth to come out." After Grace left, Robert met Jack back at the house and shared what he'd learned. "We need to talk to Colonel Preston," Robert said, pacing the living room. "He signed the burial permit. He must know what really happened." Jack shook his head. "We can't just walk up to a military colonel and demand answers. We need leverage." He picked up Grace's notebook, flipping through the pages. There's a name here that keeps coming up, Dr. Diane Fletcher. She was the physician who signed Thomas's death certificate. Can we find her? Jack was already typing on his laptop. Dr. Diane Fletcher, formerly with the Army Medical Corps, now working at a private practice in Baltimore, about a 2-hour drive from here. The next day, they made the trip to Baltimore. Dr. Fletcher's office was in a modern medical complex downtown. Robert had called ahead, claiming to be a relative seeking information about military medical procedures for a family member. When they arrived, the receptionist directed them to Dr. Fletcher's office. She was a stern-looking woman in her 50s, with streaks of gray in her dark hair. "How can I help you?" she asked, not looking up from her computer. "My name is Robert Hansen. You signed my son's death certificate 5 years ago." Dr. Fletcher froze, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Slowly, she raised her eyes to meet Robert's. "I sign many death certificates, Mr. Hansen. Thomas Hansen. Special operation in Syria. You certified him as deceased without ever examining his body." The doctor's professional demeanor cracked just for a moment. She pressed a button on her desk phone. "Cynthia, cancel my next appointment." She waited until the receptionist acknowledged, before turning back to Robert and Jack. "You shouldn't be here, Mr. Hansen. I saw a video of my son alive 2 months after you declared him dead." Dr. Fletcher's expression didn't change, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped her pen. "Whatever you think you know, you're mistaken. I just want the truth," Robert said, his voice breaking. "Was there even a body in that casket they buried?" The doctor was silent for a long moment. "Mr. Hansen, some things are classified for a reason. People's lives could be at stake, not just your son's, but others as well." "So he was alive," Robert pressed. Dr. Fletcher stood up, walking to the window. "I can't confirm or deny anything, but if I were you, I'd consider filing a formal request for exhumation through proper legal channels with a lawyer experienced in military cases." She turned to face him. "And I would prepare myself for the possibility that what you find might not bring you peace." As they drove back home, Robert was quiet, processing everything he'd learned. The doctor hadn't directly confirmed his suspicions, but she hadn't denied them either, and her suggestion about the exhumation seemed almost like she was guiding him. "We need a lawyer," Robert finally said as they neared their hometown. "Someone who isn't afraid to go up against the military." Jack nodded. "I know just the person, Lisa Chen. We went to law school together. She specializes in cases against government agencies. She's tough, doesn't back down easily." "Will she take the case?" "Only one way to find out." 2 days later, Lisa Chen sat in Robert's living room reviewing all the evidence they had collected. She was a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. "This won't be easy," she warned, closing her notebook. "The military will fight the exhumation request every step of the way. They'll claim national security concerns, classified operations. They might even try to discredit you, make it seem like you're having a mental breakdown from grief." "I don't care," Robert said firmly. "If there's even a chance my son is still out there, or if they lied about how he died, I need to know." Lisa studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Okay. I'll file the petition tomorrow. But you need to be prepared for a long battle, and for what we might find when we finally open that coffin." As Lisa gathered her things to leave, Robert looked at the photo of Thomas on the mantel. "I'm coming for you, son," he whispered. "One way or another, I'll find out what happened." The courthouse steps felt steeper than Robert remembered. 3 months had passed since Lisa Chen filed the petition for exhumation, and today was their first major hearing. The military had fought back hard, throwing up roadblock after roadblock. "Remember, stay calm no matter what they say in there," Lisa advised as they climbed the steps together. Jack followed a few paces behind, carrying a briefcase full of documents they had gathered. "They're going to try to paint you as unstable, as a grieving father who can't accept reality." Robert nodded, straightening his tie. He'd lost weight in recent months, the stress of the fight etching new lines around his eyes. But he'd never felt more clear-headed, more certain of what he was doing. Inside the courtroom, military lawyers were already setting up at their table. Colonel Andrew Preston, the man who had signed the burial permit, sat among them. He was younger than Robert had expected, maybe mid-40s with closely cropped salt and pepper hair and the rigid posture of a career military man. As Robert took his seat, Preston's eyes met his. There was something in that look, not hostility but something more complex. Sadness? Guilt? Before Robert could decide, the colonel looked away. Judge Howard Anderson entered the courtroom, a stern-looking man with thick glasses and thinning, gray hair. We're here today on the matter of Hansen versus United States Department of Defense, a petition for the exhumation of Staff Sergeant Thomas Hansen. Let's begin with opening statements. The lead military lawyer, a woman named Veronica Wells, spoke first. Her voice was smooth, practiced. Your Honor, this case is simply about a father's understandable but misguided inability to accept his son's death. The Department of Defense sympathizes deeply with Mr. Hansen's loss, but the exhumation he seeks would serve no purpose except to deepen his grief and potentially compromise classified military operations. Staff Sergeant Hansen died serving his country honorably. His remains were properly identified, and standard military protocols were followed for his burial. When it was Lisa's turn, she approached the bench with quiet confidence. Your Honor, this case is about truth. Robert Hansen has compelling evidence suggesting that his son may not have died when and how the military claims. We have witness testimony indicating that Thomas Hansen was seen alive after his reported death, and documentation showing irregularities in the handling of his supposed remains. Mr. Hansen isn't asking the court to expose classified information. He simply wants to confirm whether his son's body is actually in the grave that bears his name. As the hearing proceeded, military witnesses testified that Thomas had died during a classified operation, that his remains had been properly processed according to military protocol, and that any suggestion otherwise was mistaken or based on unreliable information. When it was Robert's turn to testify, he felt surprisingly calm as he took the stand. He spoke plainly about raising Thomas alone after his wife died, about their close relationship, and about the inconsistencies that had led him to doubt the official story. I saw my son on video, alive, 2 months after they told me he was dead, Robert stated firmly. The military never let me see his body. The casket was sealed. All I'm asking is to know the truth. Is my son in that grave or not? During cross-examination, Veronica Wells was relentless. Mr. Hansen, isn't it possible that the grief of losing your only son has affected your judgment? That you're seeing what you want to see in a grainy video of someone who merely resembles your son? No, Robert replied simply. I raised that boy. I know my son. And these so-called witnesses who've come forward, isn't it possible they have their own agendas, their own reasons for undermining military authority? Robert met her gaze steadily. Why don't you ask them yourself? But the military seems determined to keep them from testifying here. Indeed, Grace Wilson had disappeared shortly after meeting with Robert. Calls to her last known number went unanswered. Dr. Fletcher had received a sudden reassignment to a military base overseas and was unavailable for the hearing. Peter Collins had stopped responding to messages weeks ago. As the day wore on, Robert noticed Colonel Preston watching him intently. During a brief recess, while Lisa and Jack were discussing strategy in the hallway, Preston approached him. Mr. Hansen, I'm sorry for your loss, the colonel said formally. Are you? Robert couldn't keep the edge from his voice. You signed the papers that rushed my son's burial. You made sure I couldn't see his body. Preston's expression didn't change, but he lowered his voice. Not everything is as it seems in situations like these. Sometimes decisions are made for reasons beyond what civilians can understand. He's my son, Robert said, his voice breaking. Don't I deserve to know what happened to him? The colonel hesitated, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. There's a coffee shop across from your hotel. 8 tonight. I'll be there alone. Without waiting for a response, he walked away. When Robert told Lisa and Jack about the encounter, they were immediately suspicious. It could be a trap, Jack warned. They could be trying to get something they can use against you in court. Or he could have information, Robert countered. I have to go. Lisa frowned. At least let me come with you. I'll sit at another table. Keep an eye on things. That evening, Robert entered the coffee shop at precisely 8 o'clock. Colonel Preston was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. He wore civilian clothes, a simple sweater and jeans that made him look more approachable, less like the rigid military figure from the courtroom. Thank you for coming, Preston said as Robert sat down. I wasn't sure you would. I'll do anything that might help me find out what happened to Thomas, the colonel nodded, turning his coffee cup slowly between his hands. I've been following your case closely. You've been more persistent than anyone expected. What did you expect? That I'd just accept whatever story I was told about my son? Most people do, Preston said quietly. They trust the military, they don't ask questions. I'm not most people, and Thomas wasn't just any soldier. He was my only family. Robert leaned forward. Why did you want to meet me here? Preston was silent for a long moment. I have children too, Mr. Hanson. 2 daughters. If I were in your position, I'd want answers as well. He reached into his pocket and slid a small flash drive across the table. I can't be seen giving you this. I could lose everything. My career, my pension, possibly more. Robert's heart raced as he slipped the drive into his jacket pocket. What's on it? Information about Operation Shadowfall. That's what your son was involved in. I can't tell you more. Not here, not now. But it should help you understand why things happened the way they did. Preston stood up. Don't tell anyone where you got this, and Mr. Hanson, be careful who you trust with that information. Lives could depend on it. As the colonel walked away, Robert noticed Lisa at a table near the door, pretending to read a book. He gave her a subtle nod, and she followed him back to the hotel. In Robert's room, they gathered around Jack's laptop as he inserted the flash drive. It contained a single encrypted file. This could take time to crack, Jack said, already typing commands. And we need to be careful. This could be monitored. Do what you can, Robert said. I need to know what's on there. It took Jack 2 days to break the encryption. When he finally did, they found a collection of classified documents about Operation Shadowfall, a deep cover mission to infiltrate a terrorist network planning attacks on American soil. Thomas had been recruited for the mission due to his language, skills, and special forces training. The operation was supposed to last 6 months, after which Thomas would be rescued and reunited with his father. But there was more. A series of mission logs revealed that Thomas's cover had indeed been blown, but not in the way the military claimed. He'd been captured by the terrorist group, held prisoner for nearly a year. A rescue mission had been attempted, but failed. The last entry, dated 3 years after Thomas's supposed death, reported, asset status unknown, presumed terminated. Robert sat back, trying to process what he'd read. He might have been alive all this time. They just gave up on him. Lisa studied the documents carefully. This changes everything for our case. These files prove the military lied about Thomas's death. But we can't use them in court, Jack pointed out. They're classified. We'd be breaking federal law just by having them. Then we need to find another way, Robert said, determination hardening his voice. Tomorrow in court, I want to call Colonel Preston to the stand. The next morning, as the hearing resumed, Lisa called Preston as their next witness. The colonel looked surprised, but composed as he took the stand. Colonel Preston, Lisa began, you signed the burial authorization for Staff Sergeant Thomas Hanson, correct? Yes, that's correct. Did you personally verify the identity of the remains in that casket? Preston hesitated just for a moment. I followed standard military protocols for a classified operation casualty. That's not what I asked, Colonel. Did you yourself verify that the body in that casket was Thomas Hanson? The courtroom was silent, all eyes on Preston. Finally, he spoke. No, I did not personally verify the remains. Lisa pressed on. Is it possible, Colonel Preston, that Thomas Hansen's body is not in that casket? The military lawyers erupted in objections, but Judge Anderson waved them down, fixing Preston with a stern look. Answer the question, Colonel. Preston looked directly at Robert as he spoke. Yes, it's possible. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Anderson called for order, then announced a recess for him to consider the testimony. In the hallway, Lisa couldn't hide her satisfaction. That was huge. He admitted it under oath. Robert nodded, watching Preston being ushered away by military officials. The colonel glanced back once, their eyes meeting briefly. In that look, Robert saw a message. Good luck. You're going to need it. Rain fell in a steady drizzle as Robert stood before Judge Anderson's bench. 2 weeks had passed since Colonel Preston's bombshell testimony, and today they would hear the final decision on the exhumation request. After careful consideration of all evidence presented, I am granting the petition for exhumation of the casket presumed to contain the remains of Staff Sergeant Thomas Hansen, Judge Anderson announced, his voice echoing in the hushed courtroom. The exhumation will take place 3 days from now, under court supervision and with representatives from both parties present. The military lawyers immediately moved to appeal, requesting a stay of the order, but Judge Anderson cut them off. My decision is final. This court has seen enough evidence to warrant this action. Mr. Hansen has a right to know what, or who, is buried in his son's grave. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around Robert, Lisa, and Jack. The case had attracted national attention, with many veterans groups rallying behind Robert's fight for the truth. Lisa fielded most of the questions while Robert stood, silently, the reality of what was about to happen finally sinking in. "What do you expect to find?" one reporter shouted. Robert turned to the camera, his face weathered but resolute. "I just want the truth, whatever it is." Later that evening, as Robert sat alone in his living room, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole he saw a woman he didn't recognize, middle-aged with tired eyes and a nervous expression. "Mr. Hansen, my name is Karen Watts. I worked in military intelligence during the time your son was involved in Operation Shadowfall. May I come in?" Robert hesitated, then opened the door. "How did you find me?" "Everyone knows where to find you these days, Mr. Hansen. Your case is all over the news." She stepped inside, glancing around as if worried she'd been followed. "I don't have much time. I'm risking a lot by being here." "Seems like I hear that a lot these days," Robert said, gesturing for her to sit down. "What do you know about my son?" Karen perched on the edge of the couch, clutching her purse tightly. "I was part of the team monitoring communications for Shadowfall. I was there when we lost contact with Thomas." She swallowed hard. "What they're not telling you is that we received transmissions from him 6 months after he was supposedly captured." Robert's heart pounded. He was alive. What did the transmissions say? They were coded, standard procedure for deep cover operatives, but they definitely came from him. He used recognition phrases only he would know. Karen leaned forward. "The last one came about 2 years ago. After that, nothing." 2 years ago, Robert repeated, softly. 3 years after they told me he was dead. Anger and hope wrestled inside him. "Why are you telling me this now?" Karen looked down at her hands. "Because I have a son too. He's in the military, and if something happened to him, I'd want someone to tell me the truth." She stood up. "I should go, but there's one more thing you should know. In his last transmission, Thomas mentioned something called Blackbird Station. None of us knew what it meant, but he repeated it 3 times like he was making sure we'd remember it." After Karen left, Robert called Jack and Lisa, relaying everything he'd learned. "Blackbird Station," Jack mused. "Could be a code name for a location. Or an operation," Lisa added. "I'll do some digging, see if anything comes up." "We need to focus on the exhumation first," Robert said. "That's happening in 3 days. Whatever we find, it'll either confirm what these people have been telling us or—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Part of him, the part that had grieved for 5 years, was afraid to hope too much. The morning of the exhumation dawned clear and cold. Robert arrived at the cemetery at 6 a.m., as specified in the court order. The military had sent a team of representatives, including 2 lawyers and a forensic expert. Colonel Preston was notably absent. Lisa arrived with her own forensic pathologist, a woman named Dr. Helen Rivers who specialized in identifying remains from military conflicts. Jack came too, standing close to Robert for support as cemetery. Workers began the process of unearthing Thomas's casket. It was a solemn, methodical process. The earth was removed carefully, revealing the casket inch by inch. Robert watched in silence, memories of the funeral rushing back, the folded flag, the hollow words of comfort from military officials who now seemed like strangers. As the casket was finally lifted from the ground, Robert noticed something odd. It was lighter than it should be. The workers handled it with surprising ease. The casket was placed on a platform draped in black cloth. A court officer stepped forward. By order of Judge Anderson, this casket will now be opened in the presence of all parties. Robert moved closer. This was the moment he'd fought for, the moment that would finally reveal the truth. Dr. Rivers stood ready with her equipment, prepared to examine whatever they found. The military forensic expert carefully unsealed the casket, breaking the airtight seal that had preserved its contents for 5 years. With a nod from the court officer, he slowly lifted the lid. Robert gasped. Inside the casket was not a body, but sandbags, carefully arranged to approximate a human form, with weights distributed to mimic a body's mass. On top of the sandbags lay a folded uniform with Thomas's name and rank. "What is this?" Robert's voice cracked. "What did you do with my son?" The military lawyers looked genuinely shocked. One began frantically making phone calls while the other approached Robert. "Mr. Hansen, I assure you we had no knowledge of this. This is highly irregular." Lisa stepped between them. "Irregular? This is fraud. You buried sandbags and told this man his son was dead. We're calling the FBI." The cemetery became a flurry of activity. FBI agents arrived within the hour, securing the scene and treating it as a crime scene. Robert sat on a bench under a nearby tree, staring at the open casket in disbelief. Jack sat beside him, hand on his shoulder. "He could still be alive, Rob," Jack said quietly. "This proves they lied about his death. Or they lost his body and covered it up," Robert replied, the weight of uncertainty crushing him. "We still don't know what happened to him." By nightfall, the story had exploded across national news. Military burial. "Hoax. Father finds sandbags in son's coffin," screamed the headlines. The Department of Defense issued a brief statement promising a full investigation into the matter, while military spokespeople dodged questions about Operation Shadowfall and Thomas's true fate. Robert returned home to find reporters camped outside his house. He pushed past them without comment, too emotionally drained to speak. Inside, he collapsed onto the couch, the day's events replaying in his mind. His phone rang, an unknown number. Expecting another reporter, he almost didn't answer. But something made him pick up. "Mr. Hansen." It was Colonel Preston's voice speaking quietly. "I saw the news. You need to listen carefully." "Why should I listen to anything you say?" Robert demanded. "You lied to me for years. Not by choice." Preston's voice was tight. "I'm calling to tell you that your life may be in danger. The people behind Shadowfall never expected you to get this far. They're going to try to contain this situation." Robert sat up straight. "Contain it how?" "They'll discredit you first. Watch for stories questioning your mental health, your motives. Then they'll create a cover story, a mix-up at the morgue, an administrative error. They'll find a way to explain away the sandbags." Preston paused. "But if that doesn't work, if you keep pushing, there are people who won't hesitate to take more drastic action." "Are you threatening me, Colonel?" "I'm warning you, and I'm trying to help. You mentioned Blackbird Station in court yesterday." Robert's breath caught. He hadn't mentioned it. Karen Watts had told him about it privately. "How did you know about that?" "Because I was stationed there for 2 years. It's a black site in northern Turkey near the Syrian border. It's where they debriefed deep cover operatives from that region. Preston's voice dropped even lower. And it's the last place your son was seen alive. Robert grabbed a pen, scribbling down notes. When? By who? 3 years ago. By me. Preston took a deep breath. He was injured, but alive. They brought him in after extracting him from captivity. He was supposed to be rehabilitated, then brought home. But something happened. There was a security breach at the facility. Several operatives were moved quickly, including Thomas. Moved. Where? I don't know. That's above my clearance level. But I do know this. The order to fake his death came from someone high up in intelligence, not the regular military chain of command. Someone who doesn't want certain aspects of Shadowfall exposed. Robert's mind raced. Why are you telling me this now? Because what they did to you and your son was wrong. And because after tomorrow I'll be unreachable. I'm being deployed overseas very suddenly, probably not a coincidence. Preston paused. There's a storage facility in Alexandria, Unit 257. The key is hidden in a fake rock by the east entrance. Inside you'll find everything I have on Shadowfall and Blackbird Station. It's not much, but it might help. The line went dead. Robert immediately called Lisa and Jack, asking them to come over right away. As he waited, he looked at the photo of Thomas on the mantel. I'm getting closer, son, he whispered. Hang on wherever you are, I'm coming. The storage unit in Alexandria was small and dusty. Robert, Jack, and Lisa arrived just after dawn, having driven through the night to avoid being followed. The fake rock by the east entrance looked so natural that Jack almost missed it, but Robert spotted the slight difference in color and texture. Inside was a small key. Unit 257 contained only a metal filing cabinet and a cardboard box labeled fishing gear. The cabinet held personnel files, redacted copies of documents related to Operation Shadowfall. The fishing gear box contained something far more valuable: a laptop, 3 flash drives, and a handwritten note from Colonel Preston. If you're reading this, I'm already gone, the note began. The laptop has coordinates for Blackbird Station and the names of people who worked there. The drives contain security footage, including the last known images of your son. I'm sorry I couldn't do more. Be careful who you trust. Back at the motel where they'd checked in using false names, they examined the contents of the laptop and flash drives. The footage showed Thomas at the Blackbird facility, thin and walking with a limp but unmistakably alive. The timestamp showed a date 3 years after his supposed death, just 2 years ago. He was definitely alive then, Robert said, his voice shaking as he rewatched the footage for the 10th time. But where is he now? Lisa studied the personnel files. There's a pattern here. Several operatives who were at Blackbird disappeared from the records around the same time. No death certificates, no discharge papers, nothing. It's like they were erased. Or reassigned to something even more classified, Jack suggested. We need to find someone from this list who might talk to us, Robert said, pointing to the names of Blackbird personnel. Someone who was there when Thomas was. They focused on 3 names: Dr. William Cooper, the chief medical officer, Agent Nancy Taylor, a security supervisor, and Benjamin Morris, a communications specialist. Dr. Cooper had since died in what the records described as a hiking accident. Agent Taylor had been transferred to diplomatic security in Europe. Morris had left the service entirely and now worked as an IT consultant in Denver. Morris is our best bet, Lisa said. He's out of the system, might be more willing to talk. They flew to Denver the next day. Robert's story had made him recognizable, so he wore a baseball cap and sunglasses as they traveled. The media frenzy around the empty coffin had intensified, with government officials now claiming it was an unfortunate mistake during a rushed battlefield recovery. Finding Benjamin Morris wasn't difficult. His IT consulting business had a website with his office address. What was difficult was getting him to talk to them. I don't know what you're talking about, Morris said when they cornered him in the parking garage of his office building. He was younger than Robert had expected, maybe mid-30s, with nervous eyes that darted around as if expecting someone to be watching. I never heard of any Blackbird station. Robert pulled out his phone and showed Morris the security footage from Preston's files. My son was there. You were there too. Please. I just want to know what happened to him. Morris's face paled as he recognized himself in the background of one of the frames. How did you get this? This is classified material. Does it matter? Jack asked. We have it, and we'll go public with everything if we have to. Morris looked at his watch, then at the security cameras in the garage. Not here. There's a diner 3 blocks east, the Blue Plate. Meet me there in an hour, back booth. He hurried to his car without another word. An hour later, Robert sat in the back booth of the Blue Plate diner, nursing a cup of coffee. Lisa and Jack sat at separate tables nearby, watching the door. Morris arrived exactly on time, sliding into the booth across from Robert. I could lose everything for talking to you, Morris said quietly. But what they did to those operatives, to your son, it wasn't right. Tell me what happened, Robert said. Please. Morris glanced around, then leaned forward. Blackbird was a rehabilitation facility, but also a reassignment center. Operatives who were too valuable to retire but whose covers had been blown were brought there to recover, then given new identities, new missions. And my son, was he reassigned? He was recovering from his time in captivity. He'd been tortured, but he was getting stronger. Then one night there was a security breach. Someone attacked the facility, a team of professionals who knew exactly what they were doing and exactly who they wanted. Morris took a shaky breath. They took 4 operatives, including your son. Took them? You mean kidnapped them? Robert felt a chill run through him. Who were they? We never found out for sure. Some thought it was a foreign intelligence service. Others thought it might have been our own people, a faction within the intelligence community with their own agenda. Morris shrugged helplessly. The attack was never officially acknowledged. The whole incident was buried. So my son could still be alive? Held somewhere? Morris hesitated. It's possible. The people who took him wanted him alive. But that was 2 years ago, and no one's heard anything since. There must be someone who knows more, Robert pressed. Someone higher up who ordered the cover-up. There are rumors about a special projects division, codename Helix. They supposedly run operations so black that even most intelligence officials don't know about them. Morris checked his watch nervously. That's all I know. I left 6 months after the attack. I couldn't be part of it anymore. As Morris stood to leave, he placed a napkin on the table. If your son is still out there, this person might know. But be careful, very careful. Written on the napkin was a name. Eleanor Richards, Deputy Director of Intelligence Operations with an address in Virginia. When Morris left, Lisa and Jack joined Robert at the booth. We need to find this Eleanor Richards, Robert said, showing them the napkin. Lisa frowned. Breaking into a high-level intelligence official's house? That's crossing a line, Robert. We could end up in prison. I'm not talking about breaking in. I'm talking about confronting her directly. This has gone far enough. Robert's voice was firm. These people lied to me for 5 years. They put sandbags in my son's coffin and watched me mourn an empty grave. I want answers face to face. 2 days later, they drove to the address in Virginia. An elegant colonial home on a quiet, tree-lined street in McLean. Robert went alone to the front door while Lisa and Jack waited in the car, ready to call their media contacts if anything went wrong. A woman answered the door. She was in her 60s with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that showed no surprise at finding Robert Hansen on her doorstep. I've been expecting you, she said simply, stepping back to let him in. Come in, Mr. Hansen. The interior of the home was tastefully decorated but impersonal, like a high-end hotel suite. No family photos, no personal touches. Eleanor Richards led him to a sunroom at the back of the house. You've caused quite a stir, she said, gesturing for him to sit. The sandbags were unexpected. That was sloppy work by someone who's since been reassigned. "Where is my son?" Robert asked, cutting straight to the point. Eleanor studied him for a long moment. "Your son served his country in ways few people could. Ways that required sacrifices most couldn't imagine." "That doesn't answer my question." "No, it doesn't." She sighed. "Mr. Hanson, what I'm about to tell you can never leave this room. Do you understand?" Robert nodded, his heart racing. "Your son was part of an elite group of operatives trained for deep cover assignments in the most dangerous parts of the world. When his cover was blown, he was captured and held for 11 months. During that time, he was tortured extensively." Her voice remained clinical, detached. "When we finally extracted him, he was changed, traumatized in ways that made him unsuitable for normal reintegration." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that even if we hadn't faked his death, the son you knew died in that captivity. What came back was someone else, someone with valuable skills and knowledge, but someone broken in fundamental ways." Robert leaned forward. "I don't care. He's my son. Whatever happened to him, whatever state he's in, I want to see him." Eleanor shook her head. "That's not possible. After the Blackbird incident, the remaining operatives from that program were moved to a secure facility. Their identities were completely erased, new ones created. You have no right to keep him from me," Robert said, his voice rising. "Actually, we do. Your son signed extensive waivers before his first deep cover assignment. He legally gave us the authority to do exactly what we've done. He couldn't have agreed to this, to letting his father believe he was dead for years." Eleanor's expression softened slightly. "On that point, you're correct. The decision to fake his death rather than tell you he was on a classified assignment was made higher up. It was deemed the safest option for all involved. That decision was questionable in retrospect." Robert felt tears of frustration building. "Please, he's all I have." Eleanor was quiet for a long time, considering. Finally, she reached for her phone. "Wait here." She left the room, returning 15 minutes later with a sealed envelope. "This is the most I can do," she said, handing it to him. "It's not what you want, but it's all I can offer." Inside the envelope was a letter and a photograph. The photo showed Thomas, older, with a beard and a scar on his cheek, sitting on a porch somewhere sunny. He was reading a book, looking peaceful, if somewhat distant. The letter was brief. "Dad, I'm sorry for everything you've been through. It wasn't my choice. I'm safe now. I have a new life that I can't explain. Please know that I think of you often, and I'm grateful for everything you taught me. Find peace, love, T." The handwriting was unmistakably his son's. "This was taken 6 months ago," Eleanor said. "He's living under a new identity in a safe location. He's as well as can be expected, given what he's been through." "When can I see him?" "You can't, Mr. Hanson. That's the reality. His safety, and yours, depends on maintaining complete separation." She held up her hand as he started to protest. "But I can arrange for letters to be passed between you. No addresses, no specifics about his location or work. Just connection." It wasn't enough, nowhere near enough, but it was something. A thread connecting him to his son, proof that Thomas was alive. "One more thing," Eleanor said as she walked him to the door. "The media attention needs to stop. Accept the official explanation. A mix-up during a chaotic battlefield recovery. Tell your lawyer and your brother-in-law to drop it. Go back to your life. If you do that, I promise the letters will continue. If not..." She left the threat unspoken. Outside, Lisa and Jack peppered him with questions, but Robert was quiet during the drive back to their hotel. That night, alone in his room, he read Thomas's letter again and again, tracing his son's handwriting with his finger.